Hi everyone, a very good afternoon to you all. Welcome to another exciting session by Digital Vidya on design thinking, how to create a culture of innovation in the digital era. Today we have Dr. Vikram Venkateswaran. He is a marketing leader and a digital evangelist. He is the founder of Healthcare India, which is a social movement for better health. And Dr. Vikram is also an author and a speaker. He is a passionate sales and marketing professional with over a decade of experience in strategic marketing, influencer marketing, social media, and digital marketing. He has worked for and advised many global companies in the areas around healthcare, life science, and technology. In today's session, he will guide us with how we can leverage design thinking for business success. Over to you, Vikram, and welcome. Dr. Vikram, we can't hear you. You need to unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Divya, and uh, good evening, good afternoon to everyone. Great to be back on Digital Vidya. It's a relatively hot Indian summer and a very warm Bangalore afternoon. But hopefully today we will discuss some topics that will kind of cool things off and hopefully help us understand things better. Uh, as you can see the presentation, I'm calling it a discussion on design thinking. I'm not calling it a presentation. It's not a webinar. It's a discussion because uh, it's a topic that has many perspectives. It is not a it is a topic that is very subjective. It depends on your context, depends on your situation. So I think we'll have fun for the next 1 hour. All of you who can see the webcam, can see the presentation, just please type yes. Uh, Also, a few housekeeping rules. Just keep your phones on silent. You don't want to miss this. I would recommend all of you grab a paper and pen because the presentation is pretty basic, but a lot of the content is what I'm going to voice over. You might want to copy those down and keep them handy for later reference. Please participate. If you have any questions, just put it right up so that I know your questions. I'll be monitoring the chat window time to time. And finally, keep an open mind. You might have heard a lot about design thinking. You might have understood what is design thinking. You might have applied design thinking. But what I'm trying to do today is give you a different perspective on design thinking. And hopefully that will help you tackle your situations, both home, society, and work more effectively. So with that in mind, just type yes if you can see the presentation clearly. Anybody having audio issues, just type yes if everything's fine. Type no if anybody is having issues. All right, I see a lot of yes. Okay, let's go. Design thinking, as a concept, evolved over centuries. It's not a new concept, though a lot of people have started talking about it recently. It is something that our ancestors have applied for many years. It is something that previous generations have applied very successfully. I feel the entire evolution of humankind and the way we've evolved from hunter-gatherers to where we are today, a highly scientific, civilized society, has been a result of design thinking at many levels. Some societies, some countries, some individuals have applied it more than the others. Historically, India has the advantage of being a civilized society for the at least last 8,000 years. If you take the advent of the Harappa and Mohenjo-daro cultures as a starting of Indian civilization and take it to today where we are, I think we have evolved and applied these principles year on year, decade on decade, century on century. But before we start, no discussion on digital marketing, digital vidya is ever going to be complete without reference to a global survey. Because that's what we want to know. Nation maybe wants to know as well what's happening in the world. And last year, not last year, I think 2012, 2013, Adobe, which is a market leader in digital marketing, probably controls the digital tech space like nobody else, especially in the marketing era, has did a survey which they figured out that 80% of the survey respondents, and this survey was conducted globally, I believe it was conducted, it had even respondents from India. Some of you might have responded to it. There's a link for the whole study and the press release below in this presentation, and when you get the presentation, you can take out the entire study. Very interesting findings. For example, as a country, Japan is supposed to be the most creative country, which is fascinating. I always thought creativity was higher in, say, Latin America or some of these other countries, but Japan was supposed to be highly creative, according to the survey. So 80% of respondents felt that creativity was critical for growth. And India is a highly creative country. We've had our own versions of Jugaad. When you go to rural India, tier 2 cities, even tier 1s, we have our own systems, our own versions of globally accepted practices, products, or services. But 80% felt creativity was important. So we're going to start off with a quick poll. I'm going to put you on the spot, and I'm going to ask you a question. Do you feel, if you are, 80% of you have said in the survey that you're creative. Do you feel you're able to apply creativity at your work? Let's keep it very simple. Let's not talk about home or society, because a lot of us are creative at home, giving excuses for not doing work. For example, that's where I'm most creative, and I can come up with some very good theories for not doing work at home. But do you feel you're able to apply creativity at your workplace? Divya, can we have the poll 1, please?
Yes, it's launched.
Okay. So those of you who are joining, just joining us, a lot of people are joining in. We have to answer a poll. The question is whether you are able to apply creativity. We'll give about 10 to 15 seconds, and then we will take the results. Excellent. Can we have the results, please?
Sure. Here you go. 79% people feel that yes, they can. They are able to apply the creativity, while 21% feel they don't.
Okay, so we have a very creative bunch here, because 79, that's almost 80% of you felt that you could apply creativity at your work. But the same survey, which I just referenced, felt that 25% of people were able to apply creativity at work, which is very fascinating, right? Because we might have an audience here which is far more creative than the regular bunch, but 80% felt creativity was important to unlock growth, and only 25% were able to apply it, which clearly shows there's a big gap in what we feel is important and what we feel is important and how we can apply it. Which brings us to this beautiful topic of design thinking. Now, if you go by the textbook definition, there are a lot of definitions of design thinking. But for the sake of this webinar and to keep things very simple, according to me, design thinking is a desired state for any situation. It's the ideal state, right? An ideal state for Indian roads is that people don't drive on the wrong side, for example. An ideal state for the Indian government is that everybody pays their taxes. An ideal state for healthcare is that people are healthy and coming into hospital only in case of emergencies or extreme situations, and they're not coming in for hospital for just checkups and things that they can control. So design thinking is actually, as a concept, is a desired state, is the ideal state, and anything that helps you reach the ideal state is where design thinking principles are employed. Now, design thinking is not an engineering formula, it's not an algorithm, It is not something that is totally governed by science. It involves a lot of intuition, a lot of innovation, a lot of thinking, a lot of philosophy. Uh, Poets are the best design thinkers because they think of ideal state, right? If you think of songs, I mean, if you think of singers like John Lennon, who talk about imagine there's no countries and there's no war and stuff like that, that's a desired state. And that's where the principles of design thinking lie. They lie in understanding that desired state and making sure that we get to the desired state. Now, design thinking involves a lot of principles. Some of them are scientific, some of them are more on the realm of art, like intuition. Intuition plays a very important role in design thinking because intuition is sometimes the best way to think of an ideal outcome. And that's what design thinking is hinged on. So for the purpose of this webinar, we're going to keep things very, very simple, and we're going to talk about the desired state for any situation, right? Let's go on to the next slide. All right. So let me start off with a very simple example. Most of you must have read the book Harry Potter. You might have seen the movies. Now, Harry Potter is a very good example of how design thinking principles were employed to create a brand or to create entertainment. In this case, it was a boy who went to school, and it's a special school, and he's a special boy, and he's a wizard, and there's this entire revenge, school drama, romance, everything into a book that had so much more. Now, just imagine if J.K. Rowling, the lady who wrote Harry Potter, and by the way, she probably employed all the principles, and we will discuss these principles in detail as we go along. She listened, she had empathy, she ideated, she had intuition, she had imagination. I think her manuscript was rejected by half a dozen publishing houses. And she went through a bad divorce, she was a single mother, she had no money. So there were a lot of factors that came in, but she experimented constantly. She kept rewriting portions of the book. She put in a lot of what she felt into the book. And finally, the book, today Harry Potter is a $15 billion brand. I see a lot of marketers, I see a lot of business owners, senior executives here on this webinar. And Harry Potter is a $15 billion brand today. If you add the books, the movies, the theme parks, amusement parks, merchandise, everything. And that $15 billion business has not just come out of nowhere. It would have been easy for her just to replicate another story or just to add things to another story and publish it, and maybe you and me wouldn't be discussing about it. But the right elements at the right time with the right mix makes a great publication, and that's why Harry Potter is so popular. So Harry Potter may still be a very arty concept, and you can have perspectives. But let's talk about another concept that is all of us are familiar with. Everybody's familiar with a car. Now, it's very difficult to, if you look up on the internet and there's an article which says fun facts about science, they say it's very difficult to give one person the credit of creating a car. A lot of people created cars in the right? The earliest drove an automobile like this from Leonardo da Vinci in 1760s, I believe, and his drawings of those kept in his study. Leonardo da Vinci also created drawings for things like aeroplanes and helicopters. So he was probably the very first person who thought of a car as a concept as we see it today. But the patent lies with a bunch of guys. Dietz is probably the one who holds the patent for an automobile. His vehicle was a first four-cylinder automobile. But there's also patents with William Maybach, William Daimler. A lot of German folks and the French folks, Italian, a lot of them actually made automobiles that were running in Europe. But the very explosion of and the acceptance of an automobile, the way we see it today, is credited to one man, and he's called Henry Ford. Henry Ford did not invent the car, but he applied design thinking to ideate and visualize what will be the future state for this invention. He knew in order for this invention to become popular, he needed more people to buy those cars. He needed them to be reliable. He needed them to be affordable. He needed them to be available. He started producing the Model T, which is probably the most famous first of the mass market cars. And he was famous for paying the factory workers about $5 a day or $5 an hour. I keep forgetting that rate, which was way higher than the rates paid by any other factory. And the reason he paid them high wages was because he was creating a set of customers for his own invention. When factory workers started driving and buying the Model T, it created a situation in which more and more people could afford the car. And this is design thinking at its best, creating a market even before you started producing the product in such a bulk way. Today, an automobile is pretty much affordable, at least in most parts of the West and large parts of India as well. And one of the reasons it is highly affordable and acceptable and reliable lies with the vision of one man, and that is Henry Ford. That's why Henry Ford is credited with almost creating the global automobile industry. A lot of other giants came about, Alfred Sloan probably organized the automobile industry in a better way. Then obviously Toyota and Honda made it highly reliable, highly economical, and Germans continue to build the best engineered cars. But if there is an industry called the automobile industry, a large part of that credit goes to design thinking and goes to principles adopted by Henry Ford. All right. So let's move on, catch some speed. I think we're doing well on time, but I just want to make sure I give you enough time to ask questions. I think most of you have seen these images. It is one of the most popular images today when it comes to social media, and it's a great example of what not to do. Can you imagine what happens to your brand when such images start floating around? And for those who don't know, this is Dr. David Gao. He was a passenger on a United Airlines flight from Chicago to, I believe it was going Chicago to somewhere, I don't know, but he was forced off the plane, beaten, and you can see he's bleeding here. His lawyers are going to have a field day with the lawsuit. And which brings us to the essential question, why do we need design thinking, right? Do you think the people who thought of getting Dr. Gao off the plane, for whatever reason, he was not a threat, he had cleared security, he was an American citizen, he was a doctor. Do you think the people who had thought of getting him off the plane, did they even realize what was the desired state for the airline? What is the desired state for customer service of that airline? What is the desired state for the stock price of that airline? What is the desired state of the brand of the airline? I don't think so. I don't think they were even thinking about all that. All they did was follow a protocol, and it said that they had certain crew members who had to get to this other place, and so the flight was anyway booked. They wanted to get these 4 crew members on, so they had to embark 4 people. They offered people money, they didn't take it, and this gentleman's name was randomly picked out, and he was kicked and dragged all over the airline and kicked out. Now the beauty of this whole story is it would have been great had it happened once, right? This had happened in the past as well with United, and I don't understand why an airline of this magnitude, having the money they have, having the marketing they have, having the creativity, the talented individuals working for that airline that they have, why did they even bother dragging and beating a guy like this when they had done exactly the same thing 7 years ago? Now, I don't know how many of you have seen this or heard about it. In 2000, was it 7 or 9? I remember I was in the US, and one of the biggest stories then was this gentleman whose name is Dave Carroll, and I think he's a Canadian citizen who was traveling again from Halifax. He was traveling from Halifax, I believe, in Canada to Nashville, and the flight was going through Chicago. And again, he was sitting in the flight, and someone told him, "Hey, they are throwing guitars outside." And this was incidentally a United Airlines flight, and he could see his Taylor guitar Taylor is a company that makes guitars very popular. So Dave Carroll and his band is called Sons of Maxwell, and these guys, they saw their guitars being thrown around on the tarmac, as the baggage was being loaded or unloaded. Now this maybe not a great example of how design thinking works for a airline, but it is a great example of how design thinking works in case of a customer complaint. So all of us have issues. We have issues with telecom providers, with Tata Sky, with cable providers, with internet providers. And what Dave Carroll did was an ideal state. He was a singer, songwriter, poet. He decided to make a song. And that too, he didn't make a song immediately. Just to cut the whole story short, it was a very long story, and he waited almost a year before he came out with the songs. All he wanted was $1,500 for the repair of the Taylor guitar. Right, $1,500 or $1,600. That's it. That's all he asked for. He didn't ask for anything else. Instead, United, being United, and they had a lady who was in charge of customer service, and she was following protocol. She said, "No, you're not going to get the money." And she said, "This is the final word. You're not going to get the money." So Dave Carroll does something which is amazing, and he writes a song. He wrote a 3-part song. The first song was about the entire episode. It was like the whole story. The second was a more specific story on what happened to him, and the third was a song was on what happened to the follow-ups and how he was treated. The song became an instant hit. It was, I think, 2010. They named it 7th most viral video. This is how videos go viral. He eventually did commercials. He became a named speaker. He used to come in and talk about customer service. United themselves wanted to, pacify him. I think they offered him money. They also offered to use his video as a great example for customer service. Then eventually he wrote a book. And that is brilliant, just taking a simple thing as a guitar, broken guitar, taking customer complaint, customer service breakdown to another level. And the way to complain about it is to create a song. And he actually he did it in a very smart way. I think Dave Carroll, he also said that I bear no ill will toward United or the executive who refused my claim, but I hope they understand to treat people like human beings. Apparently not. Because 7 to 8 years after that incident, United has dragging a man across. But check this out whenever you get time. The hashtag is United Breaks Guitars. You can check it on YouTube. The book is available. I don't know if you want to read the book, but definitely check out the video. It's very exciting and it gives you an idea of how to tackle some of these customer service situations, right? So I would highly recommend read it, watch the video, and let me know. Yeah, Raj, I see your comment. Obviously, their stock tanked, but it's not more than just stock tank. I think the perception of United was not great even after this breaks guitars business, because just imagine $1,500 for an airline that big. They should have just settled the issue. It was a no-brainer, right? Paid for it. It's a no-brainer. I don't know why they have to drag it out and create such a big issue. But to each his own. People have to follow protocols, and somewhere that's where intuition, the ideal state works well. In an example, let's start into some theory actually, in a way. So how do you go about creating the system of design thinking? Right? The first step, and I'm going to give examples of each step, how it was done, and maybe a good case study if time permits us. But the first step towards creating a design thinking process, or even applying design thinking, getting into that mindset, is to listen. And the important thing is to listen with empathy. Now, just to be clear, I mean, empathy is different from sympathy. Empathy is, you feel like that person. And one example I always have is whenever I see somebody driving with an elbow on the roads, everybody, each one of us who's driving has been there once at least, that we had an elbow. We knew we were learners and we probably didn't have an elbow, but we know how it feels. And how do we treat that person? I mean, I see some people honking that guy or lady who's learning, some people going very close to that person and just cutting them off, some people just avoiding them totally, or some people understanding, empathizing with that person, understand that this happens when you start learning how to drive. So the first step is to listen with empathy. And listening is very, very important to create a design thinking mindset. I don't think the folks at United were listening. I don't think that the initial manufacturers, inventors of the car really understood the potential or understood who all would want to own such a vehicle, right? Uh, so a lot of these things depends on listening, and listening to whom. That is very important. You can't just go on listening to the whole world. Your product or service, it's very important to listen to the right people and listen with empathy, right? So let's look at an example of listening with empathy, and this is a great example. I learned of this recently. Uh, I think overall, if you look at the concept, it's a very simple concept, and this is a case study from GE. And Doug Dietz was an engineer at GE. He was highly successful. He was responsible for GE Healthcare and their range of MRI machines. And GE is a very large company. They're a very innovative pioneer when it comes to a lot of machines around the world, especially in the electricity, in the power space, but also in the healthcare space. They've invented some of the most complex MRIs, CT scans, uh, and they're like a leader in that space. Right? So Doug was an engineer at GE, and he was highly successful. He was leading this MRI division, and every quarter on quarter, he would uh, he would go to his customers. Just remember the word customers. He would go to his customers and talk to them, and they had a standard form that the customer had to fill each quarter, and the customer will fill the form, and Doug would be on his way back, and the ratings were good, performance was great, there were no breakdowns, Six Sigma, everything was perfect, everybody was happy, except this one fatal day when Doug was walking back from the customer's office. He passed through an MRI chamber, the kind of room where they do MRIs, and he heard one of the parents of a child, of a little girl, I think the girl was 6 or 7 years old, telling that, hey, we talked about this. I know it's going to be scary, but you're going to be fine. So don't create a fuss now. And Doug, was like, what is his father talking about? So he walked back to the radiologist, who was his customer, and he says, you know what? Sorry to bother. I don't think it is my business, but still, I want to know what's going on in that room. Why is the father talking like this to the girl? And the radiologist said, you know what, Doug, the important thing that we never discussed with you, and you never asked, and I'm glad you're asking this, but I don't think, as you rightly said, I don't think you can do anything about it, is that 80% of the children who undergo an MRI in this facility with your machine have to be given anesthesia and medication before they go for an MRI. And I don't know if any of you ever had an MRI taken. It is not a pleasant feeling, right? It is a very scary feeling. Uh, I think I'm hearing some questions on audio breaking up. Can everybody hear me clearly still? Is the audio clear? Okay. Is the audio clear? Please type yes if it is. Oh, audio is clear. Okay, excellent.
We can try, if some of the people are facing some audio issues, we can turn off the webcam. That will surely enhance the experience for all.
So the advice is for them to turn off the webcam on their side, right?
You can turn it off from your side. It will help all.
Okay, excellent. I think my voice is more important. It's not like I look like Shah Rukh Khan that you have to see me constantly. But anyway, so so guys, if you let me know, I mean, I'm very clear that I have to have empathy before I preach empathy. So if you guys can hear me clearly, uh, please let me know. I have turned off the webcam. Uh, so let me know. All right. I want you to get the most out of this session because this is a very important part of design thinking. So Doug, so anyway, the radiologist said, great you asked, but I agree it's none of your business. 80% of the patients who come here, especially children, have to be given anesthesia, have to be medicated for them to undergo an MRI. And I don't know if any of you have taken an MRI and or have seen at least somebody in your family undergo an MRI, it's a scary process because you go into this chamber and it's dark and it's got lights, and then you have to lie very still because otherwise the machine is not able to figure out all your body parts. Just like an X-ray is for bones and for hard tissue, MRI is for soft tissue, and it's very important for you to lie still because you're a three-dimensional structure, and there's a spatial time, spatial space integration there. So anyway, so the children have to lie very still inside a very dark chamber where it's quiet, where it's blue lights all over you, and it's a hospital, so you know there's something wrong. And Doug said he didn't know how to react. He just came back home and he felt, because in his mind somewhere felt he was very successful. He said he was doing a great job. He felt his machines were performing great, but yes, they were, but he had never spoken to an end user. He had never spoken to an end user. He had spoken to his customer, which is the radiologist. The end user was always the patient whose child, the person whose child or the child who was going into the MRI. He had never spoken to them. He had never gotten this perspective. So anyway, Doug realized there was a problem, and he took some actions. Right? He started talking to the parents. He started talking to the parents and trying to understand what were their challenges. And then he got the full picture. A lot of these children hate taking the MRIs. They hate going to the hospital. They are very scared. They're uncontrollable. And the physicians and the doctors, to do their best, give them a sedative so that they lie quietly and they do the MRI. Well, giving a sedative is not a bad thing, but isn't that inappropriate or over medication? It's one of our biggest challenges today. You guys may not realize, but 1/3 of the medication that we receive is either inappropriate or is over medication. We don't even need it. But that's what happens. And here was a great case of how children are giving a medication just to take an MRI, where the medication had nothing to do with their condition. Anyway, so he decided to do something about it, and he took the problem to his management and went to his boss and said, "Hey boss, guess what? I have this. I want to set up a task force to make our MRIs children friendly." And the boss said, "Great, here is $100 million. Just go and do it." No, that's not how it works, So the boss, those of us who've been in the corporate world know how these things work. The boss told him, "Great idea. I love it. I love you doing something for the children. I love your passion. I love your enthusiasm. You get no budgets and you get no people. You have to do it. Do it on your own time. That means you do your day job, 8-9 hours, and then you do this, whatever you want to do. And you're going to get no money for it. Guess what? You're not even going to get paid for it. You're going to get no budgets and no people." And that's the reality of today, right? So those of you who think about design thinking and think, I should take it to my management, just remember this example. Your only reward you're going to get is more work, no budget, and no people. Anyway, the other challenge he had, and this is true across the world, even in India, he could not make any structural changes to the machine. The reason being, it is a medical device. Though it is not invasive, it is still a class 2 device. The device has to have, in the US in this case, has to have a FDA clearance. In case he makes any changes, even a chip he removes from the machine and replaces it with another chip, removes the blue light to go with a bright light, they have to refile all the paperwork to the FDA, and that would take anywhere between 8 to 10 years for them to get clearance. So he had no budget, he had no people, he had to do it on his own time, and he couldn't make any changes to the design, right, of the machine. He couldn't make any changes to the machine. The only positive was he attended a course from design school at Stanford, and that's where I got the story. I had the opportunity to listen to Tom Kelly at NASCOM a couple of months ago, and that's where the story came out. And he worked on his own time with a team of designers, thinkers, and engineers. Luckily for him, there were others like him. When anybody who's a father or has a child will understand the pain that a child goes through while doing an MRI like this. So he had others on his team and other teams who wanted to help out. So there were some designers, thinkers, and engineers. As this is mostly an engineering company, so I assume the number of engineers would have been more than the designers and thinkers. But these guys were there and they started working on concepts, applying design thinking, what can really help. And what they came up with was brilliant. It seems like a no-brainer right now, but think of it. If I ask you, hey, we got to redesign this MRI, and in a way that, forget the MRI, we need to redesign this process in a way that the child does not need a sedative and just goes in and sits for his or her scan without a problem. I don't know what you'll come up with, but these guys came up with this. Now, this is called the Adventure series of MRIs, and they're specifically made for children. And it's a very, very simple concept. There are multiple levels in this concept, but the one he started out was called the Pirate series, in which what happens is the story is told. You can see the person who's the radiologist is also dressed up differently from a white coat. There's the father who's watching the child. The child is wearing a pirate hat. The story is very simple. The child is a part of a pirate crew, and they have just been ambushed by soldiers. So they have to hide inside the ship, which is the MRI machine, very quietly till the enemy goes away. And if they do that, they would have escaped capture and won. Simple concept, right? And you can see the wheel of the ship, and that's where the MRI goes in. Below gives you a better picture. This is another series. It's not the Pirate series, but gives you an idea of what happens. So no structural changes were made to the MRI, no electronic changes, no machine changes, no FDA approvals. Only this whole process was gamified and codified in a way that the child thinks this is a game. All he has to do is go into the MRI, lie very still, lie very quiet. And that was the only thing that was achieved through the sedation. Essentially, instead of giving a sedative, the child was given a reason, was given a game to play with. And I think it looks simple, but it took him time. Doug eventually took this idea to the GE board. Jeffrey Immelt loved the idea. The Adventure series was sanctioned, produced. They did multiple series like the Adventure series. Doug is now, I think he's still at GE. He's a very famous speaker. A lot of his videos are all over YouTube. And I would recommend that you listen to him, listen to his thought process, what he did. Big role played by, obviously, GE, but also a big role played by a design school at Stanford that helped him come up with this process. All this started because he spoke to the right people. And in this case, it was the end user, right? So my question to you, sorry, second poll question, and you get 30 seconds for answer it. How many of you actually spend time with the end user? And what I mean by end user is not a customer. I mean somebody who's using the product or service. A customer in this case was the radiologist, right? He was the customer. The customer was not the parent of the child. So get about I think 10 to 15 seconds, answer this poll, and then we'll go on to our next story. Okay, do we have the results?
Yes. So 36% of the people feel that they do get to spend enough time for understanding the end users, while 64% people says no.
Excellent. Okay, so we have some very honest people in this crowd. Really appreciate your honesty. It's easy to just say, yeah, I speak to the end user, but I think it's very, very important. I think it's very important to speak to the end user. Okay, we got some very good. We got some very good ideas. Change the room instead. I assume you mean the MRI room. Yeah, that could have been done. I think hospital design is such that each room is constructed according to certain parameters. There are certain obviously sanitation and sterilization issues that have to be considered. Also, an MRI is a big machine. Changing a room is probably a good idea, but I think in GE's case and Doug's case, uh, he wanted to make sure that he could control what he could control, and maybe he didn't control the hospital. But talking to end users is very important. You need to make a very good distinction between your customer and end user. I'm not saying talking to customers is a bad idea. Talking to customers is a great idea, but I think eventually you'll get good feedback if you listen with empathy to your end user. Also to your employees. Sometimes employees knows what's going on, and but top management, they don't have time to spend with employees, and they lose a great opportunity to make changes. Uh, but anyway, if you have a chance going forward, please talk to your end user. You don't have to talk to him every day, him or her every day, maybe once a month, couple of months. Just understand what are they going through. It'll help you apply design thinking principles in a much better way. All right, let's go to our next story. And you might say, hey, great story. But it's US. How does it work with India or Indians? So let me start with a story on Indians, and then we'll move to a story on India. Uh, the gentleman here on your screen is not just another individual showing a tablet. Now, he's one of two people. That is Ankit Gupta and Akshay Kothari. And I don't know if any of you still remember these guys. They became very famous some time ago for selling their startup to LinkedIn. And I think everybody's familiar with LinkedIn. And these two gentlemen had a startup called Pulse, and it later became LinkedIn Pulse. Now, this is a great example of experimenting and prototyping. Once you've listened with empathy, you've understood the problem, you've understood the dynamics, you've understood what is the desired state, it is very important to experiment, ideate, and prototype. These two gentlemen came from, obviously both of them went from India to Stanford, and they were studying in Stanford, they wanted to do some. Silicon Valley is a very infectious place if you've ever stayed there, and anybody in Silicon Valley wants to create a startup, just like people in Bangalore now. Anybody in Bangalore who has a little bit idea of technology wants to immediately create a startup and thinks that he's going to be the next Steve Jobs, and why not? But these two gentlemen, they went to Stanford, and Stanford is very close to Silicon Valley, and they got bitten by this startup bug, and they decided to create a startup. And the area they chose to create startup was news aggregation. Remember, these are bootstrapped, they have no money, they were living in dorms. So they used to spend a lot of time in a place, in a coffee shop. I don't think it was a Starbucks, it was a regular coffee shop just outside the Stanford campus. And they'll be sitting there the entire day drinking coffee and working on their startup, on their dream. News aggregation was a very interesting concept those days. It had not caught on as much as it has today. Today you have choices from Google News, you obviously have Pulse, you have so many other options. But those days there were not too many options, and that too in an app was even more rare. What these two gentlemen wanted to be sure is they had enough people to experiment with, to prototype, and to fail fast. So they wanted to find out 10 ways of failing to build an app that does news aggregation before anybody else. Now, everybody's heard of the Edison story. Edison created those, 1,958 ways, or was it 2,000 ways of not inventing a light bulb, and finally got it right. There's a company in England, which is very rare to see any company in UK produce anything, manufacture anything. There's a company in UK called Dyson Electricals, which makes the Dyson Cyclone vacuum cleaner, and it seems Dyson Thomas, I think I forget the first name, but he had more than 5,100 prototypes of the vacuum cleaner before he started manufacturing the first vacuum cleaner. So prototyping and experimenting is very important. In this case, Akshay Kothari and his co-founder, they decided to, take advantage of their positioning in a coffee shop. What do people do in a coffee shop? They read newspapers, and there's a lot of people reading newspapers, in the coffee shop, or reading magazines, reading books. Some of them are even, watching their phone, though there were not too many apps at that time. And they said, hey, we make this aggregated app for news, and we will start asking these readers to tell us what they like about it and what they don't like about it. So morning to evening, all these gentlemen did, and I think this was their summer project or their fall project, and they had to, and Stanford has a requirement that you have to launch your, it's not like how we do summer reports in these schools in India, where you create a report and you present it and everybody says great and you get an A grade or a B grade. There you have to actually launch it as a company. You have to try to run it as a company, seek funding, and if you don't get funding, you obviously shut shop and you come out. In their case, they started experimenting, they started bringing out versions, and something magical happened. And these things happen if you keep trying. Not that they attempted to do this, you keep trying this. Somebody, and they were doing it with the iOS ecosystem, which was brilliant. So their app was running on iOS. It had aggregated news, so daily they will create a version. Ask people sitting in the coffee shop to download it. There was Wi-Fi. They will download it. They will go through the app, and they will tell them their feedback, and they'll incorporate the feedback immediately. This went on for a while till somebody actually went up to another gentleman and told him, there's this app which helps you read news, and that gentleman decided to use the app to showcase how an iPad can be used to read news at the launch of the iPad. So Steve Jobs heard about it. He loved the app, loved the idea, showcased it, launched it as a part of as one of the apps available on an iPad. All the experimenting, all the prototyping meant that they had a brilliant product that had understood the desired state of an individual who wanted to make sure that not too many people, they didn't have to go through too many sites. They had everything they needed at one place, at one app. Eventually, LinkedIn, and I don't understand what LinkedIn is doing with Pulse. Just pardon my ignorance. I don't know where has Pulse gone as well. But LinkedIn bought it for 90 million those days, and that was a big deal. It was one of the best stories of how experimenting and rapid prototyping can help you create a product on the principles of design thinking, right? So step one, listen with empathy, talk to end customer, listen. Number two, and part of listening is obviously ideating, applying intuition, applying thinking, applying philosophy. But the second part is prototyping and failing. You got to prototype multiple times. Some of us, we write one blog post and we show it to a couple of chaps and they say, no, I don't think that's good. We just drop it there. We don't even take it to the next level. I think seeking feedback from relevant people, incorporating that feedback creates a wonderful product. Pulse is a great example. Dyson is a great example. The Edison light bulb is a great example. There is not a single product in this world that hasn't undergone so many changes, so many prototypes, and has come out right the very, very, very first time, right? Let's see if we can take a few questions. Divya, is that okay if we take us a few questions in between?
Yes, please, we can do that. So
all right.
Just read. Do you want me to read out the question?
Yeah, that'll be great.
So everyone, you can just put in your questions in the questions panel. We haven't got any questions. I think you took out some of the questions while they came around. Chandrasekhar wants to know some steps how to go about with the execution part of design thinking. What steps a person should follow?
Okay, I've given the first two steps. There's a summary of the steps at the end also. But I would leave it to you if you want to design steps that are custom to you, that you feel are very, very important. But the first thing is listening and getting that feedback, and second is creating the prototype. I think that's very important. These are the first two elements are very important. If you're not listening to the right people, not listening with empathy. That is, you exactly understand their situation, tell them what they need to do, uh, feel the pain points. What is the desired state for this set of people? Desired state for the father is not to have that conversation with his child for an MRI. Desired state for the child is not to be scared of the MRI. Desired state for the physician is not to give medication to a child for the MRI. Desired state for the G technician is not to get fooled by excellent ratings for his machine while his patients are shit scared of getting into his MRI. Right? So these are all desired states. So listening is very important. Number two, prototyping is very important. Without prototyping, you don't get anywhere. We are always afraid to put out our ideas, right? Uh, Put out our idea. We are just afraid of feedback. We are afraid that people will criticize us, and then we will stop. I think criticism is dangerous as well. I don't think if somebody criticizes you, and I've seen enough Sasbahu serials to know criticism doesn't work. But at the same time, you need feedback from the right people. So don't just go and show it to anybody you want. You want to show it to people who really want to make a difference, are intelligent about it, want to give you good feedback, are genuinely interested in the success of the product or the service, right? Um,
Thank you. Moving to Bhupendru's question, he wants to know how design thinking can help in academic delivery.
Bhupender, I assume you mean for schools. I mean, somebody told me yesterday that one of the kids told me yesterday that their school was not fun. You know, they were not having fun learning, and school should be fun. Uh, I've never been to a fun school as yet, so I didn't know how to react to it. But the child was right. Learning should be fun. Uh, there are some schools. I know this school in, for example, in Bangalore called Prakriya that focuses on environment, and their teaching methodology is mostly on design principles, working on academic schedule that focuses more on learning, less of rote. There's KFI in Chennai, and there are schools like that. But overall, I think our design thinking absolutely needs to be applied to our academic institutions. We have to start with schools first, even before we apply to engineering or medical colleges or to MBA. I think by then the damage is too extensive. Uh, it needs to be done. Desired state, child knows, child learns, child is able to adapt. Mostly what we are taught in school is irrelevant by the time we are adults, which is very sad. So yes, a lot of work to be done there. Uh, I'm not an expert on schooling. Now, Chandrasekhar, I see your comment on journey mapping. Now, journey mapping is a tool essentially, uh, and it is one of the tools for design thinking as well. You can use journey mapping, and journey mapping ideally will come in the listening with empathy stage, where you're trying to build the touch points for the child. In this case, the MRI touches how many people? Physician, radiologist, child, parent, G technician, others, and what are their interactions with it, and each one will become part of a journey map. So journey mapping is very important as a tool, but I won't see, again, I'll leave it up to you. There are so many other tools you can use. Storyboarding is a great tool. Brainstorming is a great tool as well. You don't have to just do journey mapping. I think journey mapping has become it's become very fashionable because some very large firms use it. Especially a lot of the hotel chains use journey mapping to design customer experience. Airlines seem to be using journey mapping, and look where that's got United Airlines. So I would be careful while using the tools. I would understand the principle. If you know the principle, uh, uh, it is a it's a very important concept. Now, design thinking, in my opinion, is not new, Bhupender. I think it's a very old concept. It's just become more fashionable now. So, gentlemen, we are just left with about 6 minutes. So let me just rush through our third example, which is more of an Indian example. And MTR. Uh, if anyone in Bangalore, MTR, especially the one in Lal Bagh, must visit on any Bangalore visit. Uh, MTR has done more for design, applying design principles, especially prototyping and experimenting, than any other brand in India. They were the first to launch Rava Idli when rice became a scarcity during World War II. They were the first to have packaged masalas and packaged ready-to-eat food, easy to cook food, when Indira Gandhi government introduced the price control mechanism, and they found it unviable to cook hygienic food in their restaurants. A great story. We don't have too much time to discuss it. I would recommend definitely go online, search for MTR, see the wonderful things that they have done. The company split into two halves now. The ready-to-eat snacks, packet snacks is separate. Restaurants still operate under the MTR family name. So a great story. Uh, Another example of power of storytelling, making the message stick. Uh, in India, I think Ramayana was an excellent example of storytelling on morals. How each person in the in the story stuck to his moral high ground, for good or for bad. The other good example that I found out was Snakes and Ladders. In India, a game invented in India, obviously, was essentially created as a game to understand virtues. So power of storytelling, making the message stick, is very important, and this is the third most important component of design thinking. Empathy, listening, number one. Prototyping, experimenting, number two. Power of storytelling, very important, because without storytelling, without creating that visual image of the desired state, your adaptation will be much lower. And for that, let me take you to an example which I'm very fond of. Indian example is the story of Amul, uh, and uh, and of NDDB, National Dairy Development Board, of GCMMF, Gujarat Cooperative Milk Federation. This is a phenomenal story of a country that was importing milk and today has become the largest producer and an exporter of milk and milk products, right? And all this was possible because of a very powerful tool that all of us use in India, but hardly anybody has used it for the right purposes, right? Highly recommend read Verghese Kurian's book. The book is called I Too Have a Dream, and there's an audio book called The Man Who Made the Elephant Dance, not elephants, Elephant Dance. He talks about the story of how they came up with a brilliant concept. Now, the milk cooperative story was very simple one. Farmers produce milk. Milk is connected by these cooperatives, and then milk is brought to these very large factories where they were producing, repurposing the milk, making it into milk powder, transporting it across the country, then making it into milk again and distributing. It is probably the greatest reason why India was able to succeed here, and people like Verghese Kurian, people like MS Swaminathan, who did the same for Green Revolution, made India self-sufficient in food, in milk, and obviously in eggs through the Silver Revolution. Now, one of the challenges they had was Amul had a lot of videos. They used to make a lot of videos, and they used to use this company called Radian Consulting. They obviously had Sylvester D. Cunha do the Amul moped, which is still being used, maybe one of the most widely used brand examples. And when they made all these videos, they had videos that showed them how to keep the cattle healthy. They had videos that talked about how to milk the cow. They had videos about the advantages of cooperative. But there was no story. It was just a video. What was the story behind it? There was no story. So uh, I think it was I think it was Sham Benegal who was making a documentary with Verghese Kurian at those days with Amul, who came up with a concept that why don't we create a motion picture? Because unfortunately they had to have special screenings for these videos. They never could leverage all the halls that were available, and movie halls would only show movies. They won't show videos. They won't show documentaries. So in net result was a movie called Manthan. If you haven't seen it, please see it. It's a very powerful story. Has some amazing actors. Incidentally, I believe none of the actors took money for the movie, which is very rare, right? It had Girish Karnad, Smita Patil, Nasruddin Shah, Amrish Puri, Anant Nag, so many others. It was directed by Sham Benegal. I think the story was written by Vijay Tendulkar, who spent a lot of time in the villages of Gujarat, documenting these stories, personifying these stories. The movie was produced by the farmers. So each farmer of GCMMF paid 1 rupee, and they are listed as the executive producers of the movie. 5 lakh farmers paid for this. So budget was around 5 lakh rupees, I think, or maybe GCMMF paid some amount. but the whole story about how a cooperative works, why is it successful. It starts with Girish Karnad being a engineer, a dairy engineer who comes to a village. He's organizes all the farmers, all the villagers into these cooperatives, how they collect milk, how there's resistance to change, how the local forces work against them, and then finally how it. I think in the movie it didn't succeed, or it did succeed. I don't remember, but it was a very powerful movie. It helped spread the cooperative movement throughout India in a great way. Outside Gujarat, especially in other states, and also the music is still popular. It won many awards. Remains a great example of how a concept can be told through a story and the message sent across India. I haven't seen too many examples of this happening after Manthan, unfortunately. If you have any good examples, do let me know at this stage. Uh, you know, I think it is very important for us to absorb the principle. Uh, we have about a couple of minutes. Let me go to poll 3. Uh, I think we're almost out of time. Poll 3, do you feel you're more confident? That will help me understand whether I've helped you. So can we launch poll 3, Divya? It's about 10 seconds. Is the poll open? Divya, are you there?
I'm sorry, I lost you a few seconds ago. I have launched out the poll for people. I think everyone can see it. Oh,
Okay,
sorry, I
excellent.
lost. Hmm.
Okay, can we close the poll and have the results?
Yes, actually, there is some issue with the specific poll. We had a
Mhm.
network problem at our side, so I think none of the audience could get a chance to put in their
Okay. All right. Anyway, um, let's move on to the next one. So this is, I mean, if you really want to ask me for a framework, I would just give this. Use as many tools as you want. Let me just briefly mention the tools. Identify key dynamics to a situation. Uh, Very important. Listen, ideate, experiment. Journey mapping, great tool. Brainstorming is a great tool. Discussion boards is a great tool. Whiteboarding is a great tool here. Prototype. If it's a physical product, then obviously you need to build it. If it's a virtual product, so many techniques, agile techniques are available to prototype software. And in case there is a service, obviously you got to build it, experiment rapidly, and then launch, implement, and make sure you craft the story. That's very, very important. So these are some simple steps. There are enough tools available online. You can create your own tools. I don't want to see, a lot of these tools are essentially Western tools that they've used in their life, in their society. I would not like to get too biased by it. India is a very unique country. We have our unique ways of doing stuff. Look locally around and see what are others doing. How are people identifying situations? How are people ideating, listening? There used to be this concept of the village chopal where people will sit around a tree and talk about issues, and that's a great example of ideating and brainstorming and listening. Prototype, implement, craft the story. Now, I think my overall impression is, as a country, we are very modest in talking about our achievements. Crafting the story is the most important thing. If you're not able to craft the story, if you're not able to tell it as a story, then the whole effect is gone, and you will not be able to get the desired state. desired state involves a lot of people to accept the changes that you're suggesting, and until they see it as a story and remember it as a story, they will not remember it, right? I see many more questions. I will try to answer them as much as possible. It'll be great if you could, either Divya could collect the questions, and I'll want to answer each one of them through email. Or if you want to mail me, please mail me at this email ID, drvikram at healthcare-in-india.net. The exercise for you: identify ideal state you're passionate about. You should be passionate about. Talk to people, end users. Ideate with poets, philosophers, engineers, doctors, teachers, mothers, children, anybody who's not in your line of work, who's not a regular problem solver, who's not the obvious choice. You should go with those, because an ideal state, a desired state, cannot be achieved by somebody who's already got a mindset that only this would work. Yesterday, I was talking to a hospital in Bangalore, and they told me in their committee to identify various things. They have a lot of lay people. They had a priest, for example, a father who was in the committee, and I think the committee was an ethics committee. So it's a interesting thing not having a doctor on the ethics committee, but having a priest on the ethics committee. I think we need to identify people who are passionate about that state, and if they are not like us and don't have the same skill sets as us, even better, because then we come up with the ideal solution. The more we have like us, then we don't have a design thinking philosophy, we have one-way thinking philosophy, and we know how that works in India. Prototype, experiment, don't be afraid of failures. Don't take feedback from very critical people. We are human beings at the end. When somebody criticizes us, we'll just give up hope. So don't do that. Look at people who are genuine interest in solving the problem, not somebody who's resisting for the sake of it. Write your story, send them to me. I will get all your questions from Divya and answer each one of you if possible. Frameworks, there are plenty. I'm just looking through very quick. Okay, poll is not generated.
Thank you, Dr. Vikram. I'm sorry, I lost out in between. We had a technical internet issue. So yes, we couldn't have the poll launched as well.
Okay, excellent then. So that's all I had to say. I will respond to you, each one of you. If you have any questions, do mail them to me. If not, look out for me on social media. I'm available on Twitter, etc. These are some of my coordinates. And it was great talking to you. Thank you for taking time off of a busy day and listening to me. Looking forward to working with all of you in the future, and happy design thinking till then.
Thank you, Dr. Vikram. It was a pleasure having you here. Also, I just want to launch out a poll for people who are looking for a digital marketing course. And we would love to have you all for next webinar on the coming week. And thanks, Dr. Vikram. It's always a pleasure to have you lead another webinar for our audience. And thanks for the great session.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.